Sometimes a band sucks in a way that is completely uninteresting. Sometimes a band sucks for the most boring reasons possible. Sometimes a band just sucks simply because there is no damn reason for them to be any good. In short, sometimes a band sucks and it's just a complete drag to talk about why. Do I really have to make a video explaining why Hootie and the Blowfish were bad? Or is it just enough to remind you they were bad? Anyone who tells you that it's better to play things safe than it is to swing for the fences and miss is wrong. I will take ambitious failure over abject laziness any day. Apparently, that was supposed to be the appeal of Hootie and the Blowfish. The everyman rock stars, the aggressively down-to-earth guys who made straightforward songs with absolutely zero artistic pretensions or grandiosity whatsoever. But it doesn't explain how they became so unfathomably, monstrously successful. Their 1994 debut album, Cracked Rear View, has sold a total of 21 million copies. 21 million. There were no fewer than 21 million unique individuals who needed this music in their lives so much they were willing to shell out the cost of the physical copy of an album. Why? How? And who, what, when, and where, just to cover all our bases. Hootie and the Blowfish's lineup consists of guitarist and singer Darius Rucker, aka Not Hootie, and multi-instrumentalist backup singers Mark Bryan, Dean Felber, and Jim Sonnefeld, aka Not the Blowfish. Their name was actually created by combining the nicknames of two of their college friends, which is one of those inside jokey things that seems destined to sail right over people's heads forever. The original lineup of the band formed in 1986 while its members were attending the University of South Carolina together. Apparently they were all really big REM fans. In fact, I remember seeing the members of Hootie and the Blowfish on some VH1 show talking about their favorite albums. One of them said that Murmur was their favorite album, another one repped for Reckoning. This is all well and good, but when you compare the way Hootie actually sounds to what 80s REM sounded like, it's hard not to get the impression that they took all the wrong lessons from REM's legacy. See, REM has always cultivated a similar no-frills attitude with respect to making their music, and to some extent they at least attempted to cast themselves as a group of grounded, everyday, average dudes who happen to be in a rock band, at least in terms of their public image. The difference is, REM's actual music was always just a little weird. Michael Stipe's singing was often downplayed and indecipherable. They would experiment with pastiches of different genres like funk and soul and even heavy metal. They'd make interesting songwriting choices like stream of consciousness rambling with surreal imagery, or putting bitingly sarcastic lyrics into otherwise sincere sounding songs. To say the least, Hootie and the Blowfish never even attempted anything like this. As if they heard what REM were doing and said, let's do that, minus all the interesting parts. Cracked Rear View was the biggest selling album of 1995. I'm going to repeat that for effect. The biggest selling album of 1995. And the hit singles are all garbage. Hold My Hand is pure treacle. Let Her Cry is maudlin self-pity. Sorry for myself, saying let her cry. Only Want to Be With You is saccharine, and its only good lyrics are stolen from Bob Dylan, who ended up suing them for royalties. I wanna be with you. I think they tried to get around using his lyrics by quoting him directly in the song and attributing the lyrics to him, but when you listen to the song, it still comes off like they didn't have enough lyrics for a third verse and decided to lift those instead. I'm such a baby 'cause the dolphins make me cry. This is one of the most infamously misunderstood lyrics of the decade, and I'm here to help you make sense of it. I am not here to defend it because it is not good. I at least want to clear up the misconception about it. People hear this and think, wait, did he just say that the dolphins make him cry? What, like the idea of dolphins existing makes him cry? Or maybe the fact that they're endangered? Okay, he is talking about the football team, the Miami Dolphins. I shouldn't even have to explain this. They even had the Dolphins quarterback Dan Marino appear in the video, but people still act all confused. I guess it would have been more obvious if Darius Rucker's favorite team had been Dallas or New England. Then at least it could have been the Cowboys make me cry or the Patriots make me cry. I'm half convinced people are willfully misunderstanding this simply because it sounds so stupid on paper. And I don't believe in time wasted, time walking, Some of the filler tracks are a bit more bearable or maybe just not as overfamiliar, but it's all pretty unremarkable. There's really nothing special about any of this stuff at all. It's about the most standard, unadventurous, straight-ahead pop rock music you can imagine. Like listening to your oldest, lamest uncle jamming out with his friends in between beers and complaints about how kids these days don't appreciate real music. Some of it sounds a bit more country or folk or bluesy, but not in a way that stands out even a little. The uninspired songwriting causes every musical flourish to just blend into this flavorless mush of barely discernible backwash. I'm having trouble thinking about what to even say about any of these songs. They're trite. They're banal. They're cliched. This music is inadequate. Okay, how about this analogy? You know how Tom Petty built his whole career on old school classic rock style songwriting, and he was able to get away with it because he was Tom Petty, one of the coolest all-around dudes in the world, and someone who happened to have a real gift for riffs, melodies, and hooks? Imagine anybody else in the world trying to be Tom Petty, with none of his charisma or sense of craftsmanship. Yeah, that's pretty bad, right? I would not have been surprised to find that lots of bands were doing just that for years, in completely deserved anonymity. The difference is none of them became superstars on this level. Hootie and the Blowfish released 2 more albums in the 90s, Fairweather Johnson in 1996 and Musical Chairs in 1998. Once again, I'm at a loss as to how to describe them. Maybe they incorporated a few additional instruments, some mandolin or banjo or strings here or there, or slightly expanded their influence or collaborators over time, but not in a way that makes the songs noteworthy on an individual basis. If there is any musical growth to be found over the course of their 90s albums, I'm having a really hard time finding it. They were just not the kind of band that was ever going to try to challenge or surprise you. And the frustrating thing is, I can't tell whether this unadventurous streak of theirs stems from a lack of ability or a lack of will. There's sort of a baseline level of competence in their songs that keeps them on just this side of professional, but the songwriting is so lacking in any sense of uniqueness or resonance or even reason to exist at all, that the only effect they can possibly accomplish is a sense of deep, profound averageness. You can almost imagine a version of this band making a decent song if they tried hard enough, but then you hear their actual songs and there's just no hooks, no passion, no effort or energy to anything that they do. If this is supposed to be working class rock, why does it consistently sound like they're barely even trying? You gotta capture me to set me free. The follow-up albums weren't as successful as Cracked Rear View, thankfully, but they weren't catastrophic flops or anything. Still, they undersold to the point that the band decided it was best if they took a break in the 2000s. Darius Rucker later had a successful solo career singing country music, so there's this movie called Nashville from the 70s about the country music scene at the time, and there's sort of an infamous scene where the record company brings out a black country singer to perform, and the audience boos him off stage. That's what I always think about in regards to Darius Rucker's solo career. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Probably the most significant thing about Hootie and the Blowfish in terms of their lineup is that they were one of the very few successful rock bands at the time to have a black frontman. Which is a frustrating fact, because it seems to exist only to vindicate the idea that having more diversity among band members does not automatically make the music any better. I've talked about this before, but it took me a while to develop an appreciation for rock music. Once I did, it became pretty much my all-time favorite genre, but for a long time it just never took. And for years I couldn't figure out why. But looking back at our timeline here, I didn't really start getting into music in a big way until about 1995, which coincidentally was at the exact height of Hootie and the Blowfish's success. Is it fair for me to blame it all on them? Probably not, but I'm going to anyway. Hootie and the Blowfish were the biggest band, arguably the biggest thing in music overall, at the exact moment when I was beginning to appreciate current popular music on a deeper level than I ever had before. And their success was so overwhelmingly massive that I must have just thought that all rock music was like this. And that's why I always think it's weird when someone associates the 90s rock sound solely with grunge, because this is the stuff I remember being the biggest. Nirvana? Piss ants. Pearl Jam freaking who? Hootie and the Blowfish? That's a real big name. And to this day, it's still one of the stupidest band names I've ever heard, but it never got in their way. It certainly didn't stop them from becoming the biggest band in the world. And in me, they personally ignited an anti-mainstream traditional rock bias that it took years for me to overcome. And that is why they will always be one of my most hated bands of the 90s. I am Jacob, and this was Rad 90s Music. I'll see you sometime in the future.